I'm going to start our recording and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Amy Artzer and I am the Community Partnerships Manager for Girl Scouts of Colorado. And I'm the lucky one that gets to co-host our Meet an Expert webinar series. I want to go through a few housekeeping items quickly. So our chat box is closed for the moment, except for any messages coming to me. So if you have any technical issues or questions, please feel free to utilize the chat box. We are going to keep everybody on mute for the duration of today's webinar, but we will use the chat box to take any questions, and we'll open up the chat box publicly a little bit later on when we're ready for our open Q&A. You can keep your videos on if you'd like to. You can turn them off if you'd like to, totally up to you. Like I said, we are recording today's session, but we'll only record our speaker view, so we won't ever be recording any girls' faces. I do want to let you know that we do have a fancy new Meet an Expert patch that you can get on our website. It's basically our Meet an Expert logo that you can see here. But that's a new addition and we're happy to have it and offer it to Girl Scouts. And I think that's all of my housekeeping items. So I am so excited to welcome our co-host and expert for today, Corinne Pickus, who is a State Advocacy Manager for Girl Scouts of the USA. And before I turn things over to her, we will kick things off with our Girl Scouts promise and law. So please follow along with me from home. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Girl Scout promise. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every girl. Well done, everybody. So now I'd like to again welcome our expert for today's session, Corinne Pickus, who is a State Advocacy Manager for Girl Scouts of the USA. So Corinne will talk to us a little bit about what she does and her background, and then we will open things up for a Q&A session with her a little bit later on. So welcome, Corinne, take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. I wish I was in Colorado, but I'm in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. It looks like since you're sharing Amy, it will stop yours, but that's okay. And hopefully this works. So I've got a short presentation for you today. Perfect. And that's me. So hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Pickus, as I said at the beginning, and I work for GSUSA, also known as Girl Scouts of the USA, and I'm the State Advocacy Manager in our Public Policy and Advocacy Office. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in just a moment. So GSUSA's headquarters is in New York City, but our Public Policy and Advocacy Office is in Washington, D.C., because that's the center of government in our country. That's our nation's capital. And the people that we work to build relationships with, like members of Congress, like federal agencies, the administration, they're all here in Washington, D.C. So that's why I'm here, although the headquarters of Girl Scouts of the USA is in New York City. And yes, that's a photo of me with my parents, kind of a funny photo, but I was a brownie with Girl Scouts of the nation's capital from first grade through 12th grade. No, sadly, I did not earn the gold award. That is one of my greatest regrets, but it was a great experience for me, and it's really come full circle to have worked for Girl Scouts of the USA now for over 5 years, actually. So moving along, a little bit more about me. One of the reasons I'm happy to be here, although I'm from this area, I'm from Virginia, actually. I did go to the University of Colorado Boulder, go Buffs, and there I am on graduation day back in 2011 with my best friend. And a little more about me, I also have, so I earned a bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Colorado, and later earned a master's degree in in public policy from George Mason University. But before I started working on my master's degree, I worked in Congress in the US Senate for 3 years for Senator Tim Johnson from South Dakota. And my connection to South Dakota it's important that when you, often it's important when you work for a member of Congress that you have a connection to the state. So you understand how the policies that you're talking about, how they affect the people in that state. So I had that connection through my dad and through growing up to visit my grandparents. So South Dakota might seem kind of random, but it's a place that's close to my heart, and it was a great pleasure to work for a senator from my dad's home state. So now that we've talked a little bit about me, I want to talk about advocacy, because it's a word I'm going to use a lot, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we know what we're talking about. So this is a really, really basic definition. Advocacy is the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. So what does that actually mean in practice? So anyone can be an advocate. I'm an advocate for Girl Scouts. So we advocate with members of Congress and other government officials for policies that benefit the Girl Scout movement. But anyone can be an advocate. Maybe your birthday's coming up and you want an iPad. I'm not trying to give you any ideas, but you would be advocating for your parents to buy you an iPad, perhaps. So everyone needs an advocate because everyone is affected by the policies that come out of Washington, D.C. So whether you care about the environment, you care about animals, everyone needs an advocate, no matter how small you are, people who have different abilities, businesses, they all have priorities, and it's important that people represent those priorities if you want to have your voice heard. And so that's what we do in Washington, D.C. And we also work with our Girl Scout councils across the country, like Girl Scouts of Colorado is the Girl Scout Council, to help them advocate in their states. So a little bit about what does the Public Policy and Advocacy Office do? So we build relationships mainly with members of Congress, the administration, and federal agencies, basically everyone in government. And we often say it's important to get to know them before you need them. And by that, I mean that you want to not just go to someone, in Congress when you need something, but you want to work to build a relationship with them by meeting with them, by telling them about what you're up to, by just staying connected to their staff throughout the year, so that when you do need their help with something, that you have a foundation, you have that relationship built, they know who you are, they maybe want to talk to you, maybe want to meet with you, maybe they want to help you out. And that's really important, to build those relationships with people who have the power to help you out. So we also educate government officials about policies of importance to the Girl Scout movement. And I highlighted the 3 branches of government. These may be familiar to some of you: legislative, executive, and judicial. And I put kind of a circle around legislative and executive because that's where we stay focused. So legislative is like Congress and the Senate, and executive is like the White House and federal agencies like the Department of the Interior or Treasury or the Department of Homeland Security. And so we build relationships in those areas. And judicial is the courts, like maybe you've heard about the Supreme Court. We don't get involved in any of that, nothing to do with the courts. We stick to building relationships and educating government officials that are in the legislative and executive branches. And we also help Girl Scout councils advocate effectively. So if you're Girl Scout CEO, which is like the head of your Girl Scout council, that's like the kind of like the president of your Girl Scout council, if she wants to, build relationships with, or raise awareness about some of the great work you all are doing in Colorado with your governor, for instance, she might work with me to help figure out how we might best reach that goal. Okay, so, and also I'll say that mainly that's what I do, actually. So there's 5 of us in the Public Policy and Advocacy Office at Girl Scouts of the USA. And that last bullet point, supporting our Girl Scout councils is mainly what I focus on. But we're a small team and we all do a little bit of everything. So what do we advocate for? So there's a lot of text on this slide, but it's really simple. The issues that we advocate on, we don't advocate on just anything. We advocate on issues that we, Girl Scouts of the USA, are an expert on. Because when you're an expert on those issues, you have credibility. What does that mean? So credibility, it means that when you talk about these issues, people know that you're an authority, you can be a resource, you know what you're talking about, basically. So we stick to issues that align with Girl Scout programming, so the work that you do to earn badges, for instance, and that align with Girl Scout research, because Girl Scouts actually has an in-house research institute, and it's called the Girl Scout Research Institute. So we only talk about issues that we are an expert on. And so those include increasing girls' involvement in STEM, also known as science, technology, engineering, and math, strengthening girls' entrepreneurial and financial literacy skills. That is really wordy. Those are some big words. But what that really has to do a lot with is the cookie program, because the cookie program teaches you a lot of skills that can help you in business and in life. And those are related to like maybe how you manage money or set goals or build your own business. Fostering healthy relationships among girls, and that's kind of like bullying prevention. Expanding access to outdoor activities. That's something that Girl Scouts know really, really, really well. Fostering global citizenship and a global voice for girls, and upholding a strong nonprofit community. So that is a really important one. So Girl Scouts is a nonprofit. And what that means is essentially that we don't pay taxes, but there's a really good reason for that. And that's because we have a really important mission, and that's to serve girls and build girls of courage, confidence, and character. So we're not in it for the money. We're in it to support you all in what you do. And that last bullet point is something that we've been focused on a lot this year, because a lot of nonprofits, like I'm sure you know of other nonprofits, like YMCA is a nonprofit, Goodwill is a nonprofit, maybe you've heard of Girls Inc. And we work a lot together because we have the same goals, the same priorities. So let's move on to the next slide. So how do we advocate? What does it actually mean that we want to, bring these issues forward and make some kind of positive change? How do we actually achieve that? So one way we do that is through meetings with government officials and staff. And as you might imagine, right now, a lot of that is done virtually in meetings kind of like this, or over email, because meeting in person is not really something that we can do right now. But holding these meetings is a really important way to build relationships with members of Congress and other public officials. And those are some members of Congress actually on the screen at an event for Girl Scouts of the USA that we held, I believe, last year. And events are another way that we get our message across. And so in this case, this was an event that we held in collaboration, in partnership with the House of Representatives Space, Science, and Technology Committee. And this was all about Girl Scouts' new space science badges. And basically, it was these folks, these members of Congress, I should say, gave opening remarks, and then we had a panel discussion. So experts from Girl Scouts and other outside experts came together and talked about why it was really important for girls to learn about space science. But what's really cool about these members of Congress that we planned this briefing with, this event with, is that they are the leaders of this committee, this House of Representatives Space, Science, and Technology Committee. So on the left side of your screen, Kendra Horn, Congresswoman Kendra Horn, I should say. She is a very, very, very proud Girl Scout alum. She earned the Gold Award, and she even has the Girl Scout flag outside of her office. Members of Congress are only permitted to have a few flags outside their offices, so I think it's 3. So, you know, maybe she represents Oklahoma. She probably has the American flag, of course, the Oklahoma state flag, and the Girl Scout flag. So that's pretty cool. And so she is actually, you know, the chair of the NASA subcommittee. And then the 2 on the right side of your screen, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson is the chair of the committee, of the bigger committee. So I said that Kendra Horn is the chair of the subcommittee, and Congressman Frank Lucas is the ranking member. So those are the 2 leaders. And what's interesting is whichever political party in Congress has more people elected to Congress, that person's the chair. So Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson is from the Democratic Party, and she's the chair of the committee. Congressman Frank Lucas is from the Republican Party, so he's the ranking member. So that means he is the most senior Republican on the committee. He's the top guy, let's just say that. So we really had some, you know, influential, some really powerful members of Congress came to our event to talk about Girl Scouts, and the audience was congressional staff, so the people who work for members of Congress. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we do to teach Congress and policymakers, people who are influential, about why Girl Scouts is so important and how it makes a difference. And now I want to talk a little bit about Troop Capitol Hill. So it's a cute name, no doubt about that, but these are really some powerful women. So Troop Capitol Hill, these are our co-chairs. So we consider all women in Congress to be part of Troop Capitol Hill. But these 8 women are the co-chairs. So they are the women in Congress who are the biggest supporters of Girl Scouts. And you'll notice on top, those are all senators. So each state has 2 senators. And we wanted to make sure that we had equal representation from the Senate and from the House of Representatives, because those are the 2 chambers that make up Congress. So you'll notice that we also have an equal balance between Republicans and Democrats, our 2 main political parties. And that's because we do everything in a bipartisan fashion. So bipartisan means that we work with both sides. We don't favor one side or the other. You know, you set your personal views aside, and we work with everyone because that's what benefits Girl Scouts the most. So you'll see Senator Capito is a Republican from West Virginia. Senator Shaheen is a Democrat from New Hampshire. Senator Collins is a Republican from Maine. And Senator Duckworth is a Democrat from Illinois, and she also earned the Gold Award. But I think at the time when she earned it, it was called First Class, or there is a different name. But she's a very proud Girl Scout alum. And actually, almost all of these women are Girl Scout alums. Congresswoman Brooks from Indiana, Congresswoman Watson Coleman from New Jersey, Congresswoman McMorris Rogers from Washington, and Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz from Florida. So you see, the R indicates Republican, the D indicates Democrat. So that's the party they belong to. And I wondered if you knew that 60% of women in Congress were Girl Scouts. And we don't think that's a coincidence. We think that Girl Scouts teaches you the skills to be leaders. So maybe one day one of you will be one of our Troop Capitol Hill co-chairs, and I look forward to working with you when that day comes. It's not too far off. Only got to be 25 to be in the House of Representatives. So that's around the corner, right? So next, I want to talk a little bit about strength in numbers, because Girl Scouts works with a lot of other organizations that have similar goals. And some of these organizations might be familiar to you. So we've got the YMCA, Girls Inc., Goodwill, Boys and Girls Clubs, United Way, and National Council of Nonprofits. And we sometimes have calls twice a day with these organizations to talk about how we can work with Congress to achieve our goals. So the reason I bring this up is to share that it's important when you're engaging in advocacy work, when you're trying to influence Congress, to work with other like-minded organizations, because your voice is just one, but together you can have a much larger impact. And I'll give you an example to help illustrate this point. I bet a lot of you are going to school, maybe virtually, maybe in person. And if one student goes to the teacher and says, I think we should have more than 10 minutes to take this quiz. It was too stressful to only have 10 minutes. I think we should have 15 minutes. If one student goes to the teacher and says that, well, I don't know if they're going to influence the teacher and make the teacher change that policy. But if 5 students went to the teacher, if half the class went to the teacher and said, this is a really big problem, we think that it's too stressful to take this quiz in 10 minutes, we need 15 minutes. Well, the teacher would have to respond, and they might respond in your favor. So it's really important to partner up with people who have the same values as you, and that's going to help you make a stronger impact. And then kind of finally, before we get to some questions, the Girl Scout Advocacy Center is another tool that we have. So it's a grassroots advocacy network that we use to educate policymakers on issues that directly affect girls and the Girl Scout movement. So it's open to anyone age 13 and over, and you can learn more at advocate.girlscouts.org. And what we basically do is we make it really easy for you to take action on legislation that affects girls or Girl Scouting. So for example, I think at the end of this month or early next month, we're going to release an action alert on civics legislation. And what will happen if you're a member of the Girl Scout Advocacy Center, you'll get an email and it will say, click here to take action. And then you put in your name and your address, again, if you're 13 and over, and fill that information out, and it will automatically tell you who your senators are and who your member of Congress is. And we will develop a pre-written message that you can send to the member of Congress, or you can edit it if you want to add your own personal touch. And so that's a really easy way to help us out, to help Girl Scouts out, and to basically have your voice heard with members of Congress. So I would encourage you to join the Girl Scout Advocacy Center if you're 13 or over, and take a look. And if you don't know who your members of Congress are, who your member of Congress is, and your 2 senators, this is a really easy way to look that up. I don't even think you need to join in order to do so. So with that, I'm available to take your questions. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to ask of me.
Awesome. So thank you so much. That was super interesting. I felt like I learned a lot, and I thought I knew a lot about Girl Scouts and how we advocate before, but I learned a lot. So thank you so much for that. Now is our time for our open Q&A. So the chat box has been opened. Please feel free to enter in your questions and I will read them out loud. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off while I wait for some of these awesome Girl Scouts out there to enter questions. But can you tell us a little bit about how the world of being kind of a professional advocate has changed during the pandemic, and what you think, how you think it'll impact like the next year?
Yeah, so that's something that we are trying to figure out as we speak. So, so much of what's done in Congress, historically, up until March of this year, has been in person. So we would constantly go to Capitol Hill and have meetings with members of Congress and staff, and the CEO or the head of Girl Scouts of the USA would come to Washington, D.C., and we would take her around to meet with all kinds of powerful senators and members of Congress. we can't do that anymore. That's really not a priority. So a lot of the work that we do is virtual like this. So actually, we had a change in CEOs at Girl Scouts of the USA. The head of our organization used to be Sylvia Acevedo, and I think it was this summer we had an event that she moderated with 5 U.S. senators about kind of a boring issue, probably by y'all standards, but about the charitable tax deduction. And basically, that was one way to get our point across by bringing together senators on a virtual call to talk about a policy issue that was important to us. So we're honestly still working to navigate that. We've been sending out more action alerts via the Girl Scout Advocacy Center and doing a lot of virtual calls instead of in-person meetings. But it was really common before the pandemic for organizations like ours to fly out, say 30 people from across the country, bring them to Washington, D.C. and have them meet with their members of Congress, because they don't necessarily have an interest in meeting with us as representatives of the organization. But, if I wanted to meet with Senator Gardner or Senator Bennett from Colorado, having the head of Girl Scouts of Colorado come out, well, they're much more interested in meeting with her than they would be meeting with me, because I live in Washington, D.C., in a very small apartment. So as you can see.
Great. Okay, so we have some questions that came in. So I know you spoke a little bit about your, your degree and your prior work experience before taking on this role with Girl Scouts of the USA. But can you tell us a little bit about how you started doing all of this? Where did your interest in these topics come from? And maybe if you have any advice for some Girl Scouts who might also be interested in advocacy or politics or things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've just always been interested in politics. I grew up in this area in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., so just outside of Washington, D.C., and politics was always something that my parents talked about. The news was always on. And so it was something that interested me more than other subjects, basically. And when I went to college, I knew that I wanted to pursue political science because it seemed like a way to be able to get involved in politics. So I can't say that I was very involved as a high school student, besides just as a consumer of information, reading newspapers and watching the news. But in college, I did intern for then Congressman Jared Polis, who's now the governor, who represented Boulder at the time in Congress, which is where I went to school. So that was kind of my entry point into working in politics. And I learned a lot. And one of the main things I learned is that when you're a member of Congress, if you want to do your job well, what's so important about that is constituent service. So constituents are the people that members of Congress represent. So you are constituents of some member of Congress. And so much of what you hear about in the news is about the politics, but working in I didn't intern in Washington, D.C. I interned in the Boulder office for the congressman. And so much of what we were focused on was helping people like your parents navigate problems with government agencies, like, where's my Social Security check? Well, you can use your power as a member of Congress or as a staff person or intern for a member of Congress to help people. So I think for me, it was always about helping people and wanting to make positive change. And as far as advice that I would give to you all is to just get experience. It's never too young to, now you can do so much of this work virtually. You can, make calls, and it doesn't have to be for a person. It can be about an issue. And I know you all, working on take action projects for your bronze, silver, and gold awards. If there's an issue that you're really passionate about, think about how you can tackle that with a take action project, and just, get experience, get internships, and, if you're, young enough to have support from your parents and you can, intern for little to no pay, this is the time to do it. So I would say take every opportunity you can get to get a little bit more experience. And yeah, I just encourage you to follow your passions.
There are some more questions coming in. So I think you answered a little bit about why you decided to kind of take on this career path, but can you tell us, like, what if somebody wanted your job one day? Like, what are the criteria? What do they look for in a professional advocate, if you will?
Well, one thing that is kind of sought after is having experience working for a public official. So when I say a public official, I need someone like a mayor or a governor or a member of Congress. And so I have that experience. And so I have some insight into how a congressional office works. And we're often working to influence members of Congress. So it helps to have that experience. So, whether it could be the most local office. Honestly, the more local you go, the more experience you'll be able to get, because they'll probably need your help, frankly. So, it could be working for someone on the city council, the county commission, and they'd be happy to have your assistance. And that would be something that you could put on your resume one day to show that you have experience in this area. So I think one of the main things, besides, having earned a political science degree, which I think is not a requirement, is just having some experience working in government. And that could be, local, state, or federal.
I think that's great advice. And I'll take a moment to remind all the Girl Scouts listening in and watching us today or in the future that there are new Girl Scout democracy badges. So while you're doing all these wonderful things, you can actually earn an official Girl Scout badge, which I think is just an excellent idea on all fronts.
That's a great plug. I'd also like to endorse that. I think that's a great way to get experience and learn more.
So I'm going to go through the chat box here so I can make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, so somebody asked, what issues are you advocating for in the upcoming election? But I wonder if you can explain to us about how advocacy work and elections, how do those two things come together? Because remember, you're not necessarily advocating for a person, you're advocating for issues. So how do those two things work together?
I'm really glad this question was answered, because this is not something that I covered, but it is really important. So we actually are not allowed to be involved in elections. So we're a nonprofit organization. That means we have a special tax status. That we don't pay taxes. So the IRS, which makes tax policy, prohibits or does not allow nonprofit organizations like Girl Scouts to influence elections. And that can be what defines influencing elections. So putting out a statement for or against a candidate, we can't do that. And we wouldn't even really work with someone who's a candidate. And we would work with them once they are in office. And even if they are in office, members of Congress run for re-election every 2 years. So, we're really close to election day right now. So we would be really cautious about engaging with members of Congress at this time, because it could look like we're trying to tip the scales for that member of Congress. And we do not want anyone to think that that's what we're trying to do. And we certainly aren't trying to do that. And, we have a legal department that's very, very concerned about any kind of appearance of being partial to one party or one candidate over the other. So we don't get involved in elections, but I will say after election day, when all the votes are tallied up, we'll be putting out some stats about the new women in Congress and what percentage were Girl Scout alums. But we're going to wait until after election day. And we'll really start to work with those members of Congress once they've been sworn in January. So it's really important that nonprofit organizations don't get involved in those kind of political election things. We just stick to working with people who officially are representatives of our government in our government. So great question.
That's a great question and a great explanation. So thank you for that. So Ava asked, what kind of awards did you get? So can you tell us a little bit more about what you did as a girl member of Girl Scouts and what your favorite things were and if you earned any awards? I know a lot of times on these sessions, girls ask like, what was your favorite Girl Scout memory? Or if there's a specific badge that you remember earning or an award in this case.
Okay. I like that question. I like reminiscing about my time in Girl Scouts because it did really have an impact on me. So I can't remember what I did for my bronze or silver awards, but I know that I earned those. And as I said at the beginning, I regret not earning the gold award, but I did have an idea about how I might pursue that. I even did a introductory meeting with someone about it. I wanted to teach seniors at a retirement community about how to use technology so that they could communicate with their loved ones who might not be close by. But ultimately, I waited too late. Don't make my mistake. I started to pursue that when I was in 11th grade, and I had to focus on college applications, or at least that's what I told myself. So I decided I didn't have time for it. But some of my most memorable moments from Girl Scouts probably had to do with, well, first of all, the people, the girls that I was in Girl Scouts with from Brownie through high school were some of my best friends. And I actually went skiing and snowboarding for the first time through Girl Scouts. I was really lucky to have a leader who was really passionate about teaching us about, well, it was funny. It kind of scared me when we learned about hypothermia and the dangers of the cold. But keep in mind, I grew up on the East Coast. It can only get so cold in this part of the country. So it wasn't really a concern, but I hurt myself a lot trying to snowboard, but I was very persistent at it. And I eventually did learn how to snowboard. And that was all because of Girl Scouts. And I also remember a lot of camping, which I honestly wasn't a big fan of at the time, but now it's one of my favorite things to do. So I think Girl Scouts made a big impact on me, and I really enjoyed the experience. And I think the girls that I met and the leaders were also, made a big impact on me. So you all are lucky. I wish I was in Girl Scouts right now earning democracy badges.
So I have to ask, since you went to college in Colorado, did you get to snowboard while you were here, living here?
Yeah, but it's funny. Once I got to to college, it's kind of expensive to snowboard. And,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I didn't do a lot, and then the one year I got a pass, it was like I didn't have a car, so I did depend on others. But I did go to Winter Park, Arapahoe Basin. I had an aunt who lived in Aspen, so that was pretty cool to visit her. So I did go snowboarding a few times, but nowadays I stick to skiing. I like my feet to be separated. That feels more safe.
I couldn't agree more. So I don't see any other questions in, so girls, feel free to continue entering your questions, but I have another question. Can you tell us what are some of the goals of the GSUSA Advocacy Office for the coming, if it's a year or 3 years, 5 years? I feel like those are timeframes people usually give, but what are some of the big goals coming up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I don't know how interesting this will be for the girls, but all of the way that the pandemic or coronavirus has affected our movement. It's affected everyone, right? So we are working with Congress to continue to provide relief for nonprofits. And so that's a big priority for us. Every year we do a legislative agenda. And so those topics that I talked about as our advocacy priorities, those are going to be really similar next year, but those kind of comprise or make up our legislative agenda. And so we'll be releasing a new one for 2021. And then, there's going to be new members of Congress. There may be a new president. We don't know. It doesn't matter. We'll be working with whoever is the president. We'll be working with whoever's in Congress. So we're going to be really focused next year on building relationships with new members of Congress. Yeah, and one of the big priorities kind of goes back to this civics legislation that I mentioned earlier, that we're going to release an action alert on via our grassroots Girl Scout Advocacy Center. So this is actually a good example of how advocacy can take time. And the first time you introduce a bill and you go to Capitol Hill and you try to persuade people to sponsor it and support it, you may fail. And so with the civics legislation, we expect that although it's been introduced this year, we don't expect it to pass this year. Congress has a lot of other priorities, right? There's a lot going on right now. But it's important to, start to build support and start to get people to co-sponsor it, to show their support for the bill, so that next year, we kind of have proof that this could be successful. We can show that all these people supported the bill. And so next year, that's going to be a big focus for that. It's a bipartisan bill. So it's introduced by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. She's a Democrat. And Congressman Tom Cole from Oklahoma. He's a Republican. And it would provide a $1 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in investment in civics education. So we're really excited to pursue that next year. And it's just important to think of advocacy in the long term, not just in the short term. So that's what we're kind of focused on, and that's kind of the outlook for next year.
Great. So I don't see any additional questions coming in, but some folks did message me that they arrived a little bit late. So I wonder, Corinne, as we kind of wrap things up, can you give us I don't know if you can give us 2 to 3 sentences on what you do in a nutshell, just for the folks who might have missed that in the very beginning.
Sure. So I'm Girl Scouts of the USA State Advocacy Manager, and I work in Girl Scouts of the USA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office in Washington, D.C. And what we do as a team is work to basically build relationships, to raise the profile of Girl Scouts with members of Congress, and to achieve our policy goals. So essentially, what we do is we just make sure that Girl Scouts is on everyone's mind, and that when members of Congress are thinking about, let's say, providing money to support after-school education, that they're thinking about Girl Scouts. And when members of Congress are making policy around, let's say, girls and prevention of bullying, that they're looking to Girl Scouts as an expert, and we can support them with research. So what we basically do is serve as an advocate for Girl Scouts, the organization, but also Girl Scouts as in you all. And we work to build relationships to, the one thing that I didn't mention that I would like to mention is, it can even be simple things like making sure that girls who earned the gold, silver, or bronze award get recognition. So we actually have a toolkit, and you can check it out at girlscouts.org/recognition. And basically that's for anyone in government, like members of Congress or governors or state legislators, so that they have the tools to recognize and honor girls like you who have earned some of our highest awards. So basically what we do is we just talk about Girl Scouts all the time and how great it is and how other people should support Girl Scouts, in short.
I like that. You make it sound really fun. Okay, so 2 questions that came in. What is the most meaningful project that you've worked on? And you could answer that either for you as a person or the most meaningful you feel for Girl Scouts as a organization and a movement.
Okay, well, I'll give you 2. So let me write them down. So I'll do it chronologically too. So I started Girl Scouts in 2015, and in 2015, in June of 2015, we had a camp out for Girl Scouts on the White House lawn, and that was pretty amazing. So it wasn't just for fun. It was fun for the girls, and they were all 4th graders. It was to promote this initiative called Every Kid in the Park, which is a National Park Service initiative that was celebrating 100 years of the national parks. And in order to celebrate, the way that they celebrated it was, this anniversary was to allow every 4th grader in the United States of America to visit national parks for free. And we were also promoting our new outdoor badges. They were new at the time in 2015. And so I think about 60 girls from maybe 5 different councils from across the country, who were all 4th graders, literally camped out on the White House lawn. And that was really cool to be a part of the planning, to see how the White House works and how just how how high pressure and how they think of every little detail. That was really exciting. And the crazy thing was, there was a rainstorm, and the girls had to move in the middle of the night to an indoor location, to the actual part of the White House that's called the new Executive Office Building. So not the White House as you think of it, the big white building with the columns, but still part of the White House. So they slept in, I think it's called the Indian Treaty Room. I may be getting that wrong, but that was a really cool experience. And I got to meet the president and first lady and have a photo with Michelle Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, I should say, to prove it. So that was really cool. But one of the more recent things that we got to do that was, I think, really exciting, and I wish we could do it again, was advocating for the Juliette Gordon Low Bridge, which was an effort that we did in 2018. And so, as you may know, our founder's name is Juliette Gordon Low, and she was from Savannah, Georgia. And there is a bridge in Savannah that the city council there decided they wanted to rename. And we said, oh, we know someone from Savannah who did some pretty amazing things. Why don't we name it for Juliette Gordon Low? And we had Girl Scouts from across Georgia and across the country behind us. So we started the effort to push for this at convention. So, convention is, this year it's virtual. It was in person in 2017. Because this is leading up to the 2018 effort in Georgia. And we had this big, we had everyone sign a petition virtually on iPads in the convention hall. And we had this huge banner that said, "I support naming the Savannah Bridge for Juliette Gordon Low," and it had an image of a bridge on it. And all these girls signed it. And by the end, it was totally filled with signatures. Like there was no space to sign by the end of the convention. And then we took the petitions and we took the banner to Atlanta, Georgia, which is the capital of Georgia. And that's where the state legislature meets. So we hired a lobbyist. We brought 400 girls to the Capitol on one day. And these girls, I did a training for them where we talked about how to get your message across and how to get it across quickly, because that's really important. We talked about what you call an elevator pitch, which is really just in 30 seconds, can you tell a legislator why this issue is important to you, and can you get your message across? And they did an amazing job. There was coverage all over the news, on the CBS Evening News. There was a young, I think she was a junior Girl Scout who just really aggressively but politely lobbied some state legislators. And although ultimately we were unsuccessful, we really fought a great fight. And we used the Girl Scout Advocacy Center as well, our grassroots tool, which I continue to promote, to just bombard these state legislators with messages from girls from across the country. Usually it's important to only contact legislators that represent you. And those are the people that your legislators want to hear from. But we thought that this issue was so big for the movement, and girls really wanted to have their voices heard. So they actually literally, some legislators asked us, like, can you please stop the emails, because they were getting so many emails from passionate Girl Scouts from across the country, who wanted this bridge in Savannah to be named for Julia Gordon Low. So it was really fun to teach girls about advocacy. It was really fun to be at the Capitol, and that was definitely one of my most impactful experiences since working here at the Public Policy Office.
Those were two awesome stories. I really enjoyed listening to them. Okay, so this is going to be our second to last question, because I'm going to close out with the question that we ask all of our experts. But our second to last question would be, do you like your job? It's a pretty straightforward one, and I feel like I can answer for you, but the stage
most days I do, but I'll say this. It's hard to like your job every day. It is work. They call it work for a reason. I'm passionate about what I do, and in those moments where I am not so passionate about what I do, I remember you all and how this is bigger than me. So I think it's kind of important to just focus on that and focus on the mission. We're here to build girls of courage, confidence, and character. And some people say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, but work is still work. I'll be honest with you. And to do events like this and to actually speak with girls and answer your questions, this is what keeps me going. So thank you for having me, because this is going to propel me for the next few months. I'll probably love work every day for the next few months following this, because this was so fun to do. But yeah, most times, yes, I do like what I do.
I love that. Okay, so this will be our last question, and we always ask all of our experts this, and that would be, what is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Oh, okay. Gotta think about this. It's like, here's the problem. Does anyone remember thanks-a-lots? They're not coming back next year. So it's kind of breaks my heart, but thanks-a-lots. I like the message on the cookie. I think they're delicious. Shortbread with a little chocolate. Can't go wrong. And when I was selling Girl Scout cookies, we had a cookie that was very similar called All Abouts, and reminds me of those days. So now if I were to pick from the current crop, I'm excited to try the new cookie. I don't know if that's information is public, but there's a new cookie coming out. I think it is, but I'm excited to try the new cookie. And if you know what it is, then you know why it's exciting. But of the cookies that are kind of the standards, I got to go with Samoa, and I didn't like that when I was a kid, but Samoa, the chocolate coconut crunchiness. Yeah, I think I just named 3 different cookies, but I like Girl Scout cookies. What can I say?
That's okay. They're all delicious in their own ways. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I already mentioned that I learned a ton. I hope all the Girl Scouts out there as well did. So thank you, Corinne, again for joining us, and thank you to all the Girl Scouts who signed in today and all who are watching in the future. We will post our recording to our YouTube page as well as our blog, and then we'll share out on social media as well. I hope you all had a great day. If you're interested, we have a couple more meet and expert sessions coming up just in the month of October, and then we'll continue them through the rest of the year and into the new year. So great opportunities to meet women in all different types of career paths. So thank you all so much. I hope you had a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. So fun.